They're coming to get you, Barbara. Oh, it is such a shame I do not know anybody named Barbara. I would never get tired of that. They probably would, but I wouldn't. At any rate, today's lesson, we're going to have a look at George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead. Just kidding. We're actually going to have a look at George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead. What? That's crazy talk, evil professor. Yeah, it is. But we are going to be looking at, there are two different movies. We're going to look at the 1968 Night of the Living Dead, the original classic, black and white, the way it should be. Maybe not so much this edition, because the bright red Trapper Keeper it comes in, well, it frightens me just a little bit. But let's have a look at this movie. Now, before we get going too far, there is one thing I'd like to point out on this main title screen. You notice, yep, it says Night of the Living Dead, that's what it is, but there is something that's missing. There's no copyright notice. I will come back to that. Now, the plot. Well, you know what? I'm not going to go into too much because I don't want to spoil anything. The movie may be 40 years old, but there's a chance you haven't seen it. Essentially, it's a number of strangers who are trapped in a house in the middle of BF nowhere, who are trying to survive the night as hordes of these creatures that do look like people, kind of, slowly, and I do mean slowly, advance on them. Now, of these survivors, we'll talk about a few. There is Ben. He is our protagonist. He is our good guy, and he is awesome. He's a badass. He does a number of cool things, and if anybody's going to survive this thing, it has to be him. Next, we have Tom. Tom is our dumbass. He's kind of like a sidekick if your sidekick was stupid and not terribly helpful. So we have him. And then next, we have Cooper. He is our ass. Yeah. He's the antagonist of the piece, even though the threat is outside. But he is the antagonist. He is our conflict within the house. I don't like him. He's very irritating. And when he gets his, I am quite happy about it. Now, there are a few other characters that we'll talk about. There's Barbara, there's Judy, and there's Helen. They don't really do much. The movie does spend a fair bit of time with Barbara, especially at the beginning. She is the Barbara that they're coming to get. But really, most of the female characters in this movie don't really contribute a whole lot. Most of them are really just zombie chow, especially Judy. Not really good for anything else. She's good for looking sour and then getting eaten. I'm not going to go too much further than that. Now, the other thing I would like to talk about is the effects in this movie. Because it's black and white, they did have one nice thing they could do. In terms of blood, I'm pretty sure they really just used chocolate syrup. It's dark, you can pretend it's blood, and let's face it, it'd be easy and cheap to get a hold of to do. The other special effects that they use are pretty good. Again, for its time, it was 1968. Obviously not the gruesome gore that we see now, but they were pretty good. Plot, you know what? The plot moves at a pretty decent pace most of the time. There are, however, a few instances where you are going to be glancing at your watch or at the numeric display on your DVD player. Example of this would be all the characters are sitting in front of the TV, some of them smoking, watching a news report. For some people, this is every night. We don't really need to be seeing it in a movie. There is a reason for this, though. It's the exposition. It's their way of telling the audience what is going on. So that's where we find out, yes, they're dead. Yes, they eat the flesh of the living. Yes, you shoot them in the head and they go down, and then we should probably burn the bodies. That's where we get all of this stuff. So there are times it feels like it's dragging on a little bit, and I think they spend a little bit too much time on these reports, but it does help us sort out what's going on, because up to this point, we have no clue. There's just these people slowly walking towards the house, and that's really about it. And again, very slowly. So the big question is this movie scary? It is a horror movie, so it should be. Is it scary for the evil professor? Well, no. I go by the evil professor. It's not going to scare me. Why? Well, these things don't tend to scare me in general, and I am a little bit demented. On the other hand, the wife had nightmares after watching this. I think it was this dude over here. Okay? So yeah, it is scary. And back when the movie came out, it scared people really well. Why? Well, I mean, it had a little bit of blood and guts, which I don't think we had seen too much at the time, especially in such graphic detail. But just the concept of it. You're trapped in a house in the middle of nowhere, And these things, these cannibals, that's all you really know, are slowly marching towards it, and they're unrelenting, and we can't stop them. So yeah, it was pretty scary for its time. Now, something else I want to point out. The nice thing about this movie, even if you don't get this Scary Red Millennium edition, is that there are tons of editions of this movie out there. For example, we have Night of the Zombies, which has 5 movies on 2 DVDs. And it's got some other movies on it by some people you don't know, Vincent Price, Bela Lugosi, and Lucio Fulci's in there. I think the wife bought this for $5 at our local Walmart because it's Halloween. So, and the reason for that is, and I said before, notice the title credit, no copyright. They had problems, George Romero and the people who helped make this movie, had problems with the copyright issue. Since it didn't say copyright in the beginning, everyone seemed to think it was fair game. That's why we have so many of these bargain basement copies, and you'll see colored versions and other versions, and all these on DVD probably for $5. It's bad for the people who made the film. It's good if you just want to get a copy of it and see it, because you'll be able to at a relatively cheap price. And that is nice. Now, overall, what I think of this movie, it's pretty good. If I'm going to give it a grade, it's going to get a grade of B. And you know why? Because it's a B movie. It is a budget movie, so B is fitting. But it is a pretty good movie. Not my favorite, but it is a classic. It spawned the whole subgenre of zombie flicks, so if nothing else, it does deserve a turn in your DVD player. I think that wraps it up for this lesson. As George A. Romero would say, stay scared, have a good night.